Hey all, Grolo here. Today I thought we would chat about creating worlds in these digital simulations that we call video games. One of the members on the Discord suggested we take a look at this video together. It is from a conference, a yearly conference that is organized and held in Breda, or at Breda University. The name of the conference is Everything Procedural, and Mainframe participated in the conference this year, talking about how they are creating their virtual worlds. Just don't worry, this video is not about Pax Dei explicitly. I'm going to take a look at this video in the context of the most recent CitizenCon Direct and all the information and demonstration and kind of view that they gave us into their world creation technology, which they're calling Planet Tech V5, that works in conjunction with Starchitect and all that. So I thought maybe we could compare and contrast these things a little bit. We might bounce over, watch a little bit of the CitizenCon Direct V5 demonstration. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. But yeah, this looks pretty technical in nature, and it's been a while since we reacted to anything on this channel, so I'm looking forward to this. Let's dig in, and thank you to Decker, who was the one who shared this video on Discord. Let's go.
Okay, last talk of the conference. Try to stay awake. So hey all, I'm here to talk about world creation. No, not that one. And instead of 7 days, I only have 20 minutes, so hold on to your hats. So, hi again, I'm Eetu Martola. As always, this is not just me, but a team effort. Ilkka is my partner in crime in this, and Laura and Rule have left their mark in the generator as well. All in all, the world team is 5 people, with 2 of us tech artists. The company is Mainframe. I guess we are an indie startup with 62-ish people, and that is not a lot for a full-scale MMO.
That is not a lot.
One half of the company is in Finland, one half in Iceland, and one half is scattered all over. The game...
For anybody who doesn't know, these Mainframe devs, a lot of them come from CCP, which is the company behind EVE Online, also based in Iceland.
It's called Pax Dei. It's a medieval sandbox MMO with a large open world, using Unreal 5.4 at the moment. And currently we are in early access. I have no time to talk about the game itself, but look it up.
You're saying early access right now. Apparently this video was recorded 2 weeks ago, actually, so it would have been... Well, it was uploaded to YouTube 2 weeks ago. I actually don't know the date of this, but obviously it was prior to the 1.0 launch.
Somewhere it's cool. So that you know what I'm talking about, here's what the world looks like at the moment. And some screenshots.
For anybody who hasn't played, the Pax Dei world is beautiful.
And the players can also build in the world, but that's not the topic today, but it's really nice. So
obviously much smaller in scope.
We need to create a very large world.
That's Star Citizen, though.
And a dense one with not many people, which means to the great...
The density of the Pax Dei world is one of the things that makes it so immersive and nice to look at. This is something that we don't have in Star Citizen today. When you land on the planets like Microtech or Hurston or whatever, you start walking around, you don't really have a lot of density. You know what I mean? Like if you're going through a forest, I mean, the trees are pretty far apart. Vines, grass, like weeds, whatever you see on the planetary surface is kind of sparse. But it looks to be changing in Planet Tech V5, and it cannot be overstated, I think, how much density in the environment, the foliage, and all the things around you really brings the landscapes to life, in my opinion.
It's a price of everyone here that we need to go procedural. Or rather, procedurally assisted, as I like to say. Let's start with some philosophy. Firstly, we do not want to go full procedural. Fractals are boring when you look at them for more than 10 seconds. The world needs a human touch, but a computer needs to fill in the rest. This has been a guiding principle for us, how to get a human to make the important decisions and not have to make the boring decisions.
There's already a lot of overlap here. It's funny how all of these companies do things so similarly because they're the right way to do things, right? If you would go back to some of the conversations C.I.G has had about Planet Tech V5 and especially Starchitect, it is humans that are seeding the configuration data, and then the machine is acting on that data to generate the thing. And then if the humans don't like what they can see, they can tweak some values, move some levers, pull some cranks, and the system will make changes to the world. It'll kind of regenerate, update. And there's a lot of reasons to do it that way. One, it increases the leverage on the human skill sets. It allows them to do a lot with very little time, but also repeatability. If C.I.G later comes out with even better technology, Planet Tech V6, and it does who knows what, even something better than V5, all of the configuration data that went into V5 will be forward portable to V6 and allow the regeneration of these planets, right? Like they're going to be doing that with Planet Tech V5 already with Stanton. If you go look at those Stanton or the B.R.O planets, they were generated with Planet Tech V4, right? But everything that went into V4 will forward to V5, and they'll just have to layer on the additional data that V5 needs to do some of the magic stuff that it's doing. But in the end, you'll get similar reconstruction. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's another really good reason to do it this way.
On a very abstract level, for us, this means a world artist draws a map and the computer creates a 3D world out of it. A handmade world would be the prettiest, but that's just not realistic with our team. But the manpower question...
He said it's not realistic with his team to do a handcrafted world. Now keep in mind that Pax Dei is like a minor fraction of the scale of Star Citizen and the Star Citizen universe. Pax Dei consists of, I don't know. I might have even said it earlier, but I think it's like 100 square kilometers, which if you think about that in Star Citizen terms, that's nothing. But even at that scale, you really can't afford the human power to craft that entire world by hand. Now, C.I.G has the same problem on a much larger scale. They have a much larger team. He said that Mainframe is 62 people. C.I.G has, 1,000 people. Now, far less than that working on the planets, obviously. Who knows how many is on that? I don't recall off the top of my head. But it doesn't really matter what scale you're working at. You need, unless you're talking very, very small scale and very, very low fidelity. But again, the higher the fidelity goes, the more work is needed, the more human power that would be needed, and it's just not realistic to sustain that. So.
It's only half of the reason to go procedural. The other half is about making large changes. And not just the ability to make large changes, but the low threshold of making changes. It's easy to be afraid of making changes because all the downstream cost and quality comes from how many changes you can make. This is the leverage I
was talking about.
By keeping the whole world generation live, it's easy and cheap for us to make even sweeping changes without fear.
I'm sorry to be pausing so much, but there's just so much being said right now that I can relate to. This applies to a lot more in technology than just world creation, right? You get this same line of reasoning and logic whenever you're talking about managing systems, for example, which is something I do on a regular basis. You don't want a human, you go back 25, 30 years, humans were manually racking servers and installing the operating system and getting a prompt on the server and setting everything up. We don't do that anymore because now one server is not enough to manage the load of the kinds of utilities and services that we're building. Now we need hundreds or thousands of servers. You can't have a human in there tinkering with each server and setting up each server. Now we have tooling that abstracts it back to, configuration management systems and all kinds of crazy DevOps tooling that we're not going to get into right now, but it allows us to orchestrate, that's the magic word, hundreds or thousands of servers with simple configuration files. I can now define, I want a fleet of 1,000 servers that do these things. You run a script and boom, you have 1,000 servers in the cloud that are doing the things that you requested, right? It's a very similar principles to what these people are doing with world generation in digital simulations. I want a planet with these properties created. I want a solar system with these properties created. So it's interesting, the overlap in logic and reasoning.
The world is generated from scratch each time. If we had done manual changes and fixes to the world, those would be lost and would need to be redone.
Exactly. If they had done manual changes, they would have been lost and redone. That's what I was just talking about whenever I was talking about repeatability is what I call it. That's what we call it in the line of work that I do, right? That configuration file, like think of you have a fleet of AWS servers running your service, and there's a disaster in that AWS region. If you had set up all those servers by hand, and some flood wiped out that data center, and let's just assume the backups failed, whatever. Could you imagine having to recreate all of that infrastructure in another data center? But if you had the configuration files that were used to generate that cluster of servers that powered your service, safely sitting in a GitHub repo somewhere, you could just target the next data center with your configuration orchestration logic and let it blast out another 1,000 servers for you, right? So the exact same principles here that he's talking about. If they have to recreate the world, maybe there are tech advances in some way, and they want to use all the previous tech and configuration to regenerate the world with new capabilities. You can do that a lot easier with this approach than you could the human hand approach. Anyway, I'll get off that soapbox now.
Yeah, we literally could lose our Unreal levels and we would be fine. And for third, we are creating a realistic world, but it can't be just a scan of a real place. That would look good, but it wouldn't play good. The world is a servant to the game systems, and the game design rules over world design. And in effect, that means that, for example, our biome placement is not in any way natural. And then our world...
That's an issue I don't know that Star Citizen has, because they are doing entire planets at 1/6 scale. C.I.G has explicitly said that they are engineering Planet Tech v5 and the systems that naturally determine where features of planets should exist based on where nature would have them exist. I think they can afford to do that because they're representing entire planets. Whereas Pax Dei, you have a little 100 square kilometer, not little, it's a large world to play in, but by contrast to Star Citizen, it's a very little place. And so they can't afford to be as realistic, I suppose, is kind of the way I'm thinking about that. Because they want to represent all the biomes in a very small area, so they don't have the luxury that Star Citizen does to make it realistic, is what I'm thinking.
World layout. The world is made of regions, and currently we have only one.
There you go.
This one's modeled roughly after southern France. A region is made of provinces with gates between them. Every province is 10 by 10 kilometers and is their own world partition root level in Unreal. And a province is further made of cells.
Okay, I'm wrong. I was thinking it was 100 square kilometers. It looks like
it's an Unreal
20?
level that is level instanced to the province root level. So a root level is a 5 by 5 grid of level instances. And the basic...
let's go back to that slide a second. So, just as an aside, we're talking about world creation and not necessarily the technology that powers these worlds, but this obviously is a huge difference between Star Citizen and how it will assign compute to the worlds to bring them to life, and how Pax Dei is doing it. Pax Dei is using basically out of the box Unreal Server 5 technology to run these things. And so you have this grid, they're calling cells, I'm assuming that's what Unreal calls them, so that each one of those cells, where those word levels are, that is a server assigned to that cell, which is, I usually call that a tile within the province, right? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 5 by 5, so 25 cells. That's 25 servers powering that province. Whereas Star Citizen does something similar with static server meshing today, although they're not assigning servers at this granular level. It's like they have a server assigned to Hurston, right? But there's far less people on a Star Citizen shard right now than there are in a Pax Dei shard. Now, but the interesting thing is Star Citizen's direction. They're moving in the direction of being able to assign servers to bring these worlds to life at a granular level like this, but it's going to be dynamic, and those servers will be applied where they're needed. You know, this is a you know, I guess you could call it a shortcoming of Unreal Engine 5's technology, where you have 25 servers assigned to this province, even if half the province is empty. Anyway, I just wanted to connect that thought there, because I had it whenever I saw this chart. And to put this in perspective for any who might not know, Ashes of Creation uses the exact same methods here. They are also using Unreal Engine 5 game servers, but Ashes of Creation rewrote the entire networking stack to give them more capabilities. I know for a fact, just based on past readings of how Mainframe approached this, that if one of those levels gets overwhelmed on a Pax Dei server, they actually they layer it. So they will introduce another server for that cell, and then they'll split players between them, so that, just like World of Warcraft, like if you're standing at the bank in Oregon, Orgrimmar gets layered, half the people around you will vanish, they'll go to a different layer. That's exactly what Pax Dei is doing, whereas Ashes of Creation, their approach is one of those tiles or cells, they'll just subdivide it into 4. So now you have 4 servers where previously you had 1, and they're going to try to balance the population that way. So that gives you less layering, layering is definitely immersion breaking. So that's a plus for Ashes of Creation's approach, although I have not actually seen it work yet. Unlike Star Citizen, we have actually seen Star Citizen's meshing technology work very well. Even Pax Dei's current meshing technology leaves some things to be desired. When you cross a server boundary, it is not invisible in Pax Dei today. You feel it. You feel the jank, the lag, just like you did in Dune, just like you do in Ashes of Creation. I have yet to see one of these meshed Unreal 5 games not have that jank and latency as you cross server lines. However, I have never felt that jank in Star Citizen. So,
Level is a 5x5 grid of level instances. And the basic layout of the pipeline. First, we have our carefully selected human inputs, then the actual generator, which results in a lot of outputs. And all this is governed by B.R.O, our build resource orchestrator.
Bro.
Oh, let's dive in. So on the top of the pipeline are the human inputs.
Bro.
First, we have a crude sculpt of the whole world. It's really needed to make the world interesting and so that it makes sense. Like in the north, we have this mountainous region, and then lowlands over there with some big lakes in between or something like that. There is very little detail in the sculpt. It's mostly just about the masses, so it's still cheap to make changes to it. Next up is the map making.
That's interesting and different from what C.I.G is doing with Planet Tech V5. I don't think, I could be wrong. I don't know that C.I.G is doing sculpting like this. I think my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but my understanding is that theirs was more parameter based. Here's the parameters of the planets. Figure out how the geology would evolve over time and create me a planet that suits these parameters. So the machines are actually determining where the mountain ranges would be, where the lakes would form based on weather patterns and all that stuff. Geological activity. That's my understanding, but I also, the reason I hesitated there for a second, because I also remember River Guy at C.I.G talking about carving rivers into the planet and how that process worked. So now I'm not so sure. Maybe there's a little bit of human sculpting mixed in with kind of the machine generation based on ecological data. Yeah, my memory is not crystal clear on that. So if yours is, hit me in the comments.
So it's still cheap to make changes to it. Next up is the map making. We do not have the manpower to create our own world editor, and because we already want to work on the level of a 2D map, then why not use an actual map making software? So we are using QGIS as our world
Interesting.
editor. And in this 2D map, we mark up the locations of all the sites in the world, the road connectivity, the lakes and such, as well as biome areas and server zones. And this data lives in a PostGIS database, which we can query from Houdini.
That makes a lot of sense, using like a real world mapping software and then taking the output of that and generating it through some kind of transformation process that would bring it in to the game. That's an interesting approach. Contrasted with C.I.G, who does have the manpower to create their own world editor and has. So.
And all the tabular data is in a bunch of sheets, stuff like which plants grow in which biomes, in which amounts, and so on. There's quite a few of these.
I have said for a while that
and we have no user
Mainframe
parameters
is
in Houdini
the
or in
most
Unreal.
pragmatic.
Everything.
Sorry, I'm talking over him. I have said for a while that of all the dev teams that we're kind of watching and tracking, C.I.G, obviously, Ashes of Creation, and Intrepid, and Mainframe with Pax Dei. This Mainframe group is the most pragmatic of all those dev teams. So the fact that it looks like they're using Google Sheets or something here to track the data that the real world mapping software can't track for them is no surprise.
Things in the sheets. And quick pro tip, it's really easy to work with Google Sheets and Houdini. You can just share the Google Sheet as CSV and then make I guess it's one line change in the the Houdini table import SOP, so you can just read from Google Sheets.
I'll have to look that up.
And yeah, the rest is then the generator. You all know Houdini and the...
Let's just do it now. .3D animation visualization of sex software from Side FX. Known for. Okay, so 3D animation software. Okay. So Houdini is the software they are using to create the assets that get imported into Unreal Engine and so forth. Okay. Makes sense.
Unreal plugin. The plugin is really meant for creating interactive tools for using inside the editor, but we use it to run an automated hands-off pipeline. The generator itself is one monolithic HDA and is run in Unreal separately for each world cell. So one instance of the tool in all of those sublevels.
Getting a little outside my area.
It knows where it is in the world and generates the 2 kilometers around itself. It owns that world cell. It's a nicely modularized system. One module does the lakes, one does the roads, and so on. And it wasn't always so nice. When working on a generator like this, it's really easy to want to have everything depend on everything else, and that gets really ugly really fast. It's a bit of that good old mad wizard syndrome that Houdini people easily get.
I don't think it's just Houdini people.
Functional programming mindset. Each module can only use the data from its input. No references whatsoever are allowed. This way, it's also easy to just bypass a module.
I'm a huge fan of functional programming, for what it's
Looking
worth.
inside an empty module, we have the inputs and the outputs, which are kind of the API of the modules. Different types of data flow in their own pipes, like landscapes, masks, instances, and so on. And each module adds its own stuff to these pipes as packed geometry. Any later module can then easily pick up the data packages it needs from these data pipes. And every data package also shows which module created it if you need to go back. And
always good to have traceability.
The main modules. At first, we do the large-scale processing, some neural networks, some lake finding, a bit of erosion, stuff like that. And this is done on the whole province level to ensure the continuity across the cell edges. Next up is settlements, basically all points of interest.
That's interesting. He mentioned earlier that the world generation happened within a cell. And so they need some kind of like a pre-processing system to look at the entire world and figure out what's happening along those cell edges, and probably, I would imagine, feeding like the additional information into the world generator within the cell. Interesting approach. Very different from C.I.G's approach.
These are all handmade level instances in Unreal. And each one also has a separate footprint geometry on disk, which is used to modify the landscape to snugly fit the level instance. We have three sorts of lakes. Ones at sea level, at the bottom of the valleys, automatic ones from Gaia, and ones drawn on the map. The other two are quite easy to integrate to the landscape, but the drawn ones are not really usually in a physically correct location, so we have to do quite a bit of massaging of the surroundings. Bridges, they are modular and adapt to where they are put. And for small sites and encounters, we do not want to manually add them onto the map. That would be just too much. So they are generated randomly in clusters. They
generated randomly in clusters. Interesting. Sounds a lot like Starchitect, huh? Yeah, I mean, C.I.G has the same issue at a much larger scale. Now again, Pax Dei is a much denser game today. I expect the density in Star Citizen to increase over time, especially with Planetech v5 and Starchitect. It seems to be one of the things explicitly that Starchitect is going to be doing for us, is increasing the density of POIs and making sure that POI location relative to mining materials makes sense, and that type of thing. But it sounds like C.I.G's approach is a lot more based on the physical environment and what should exist where, based on what the physical properties of that area of the planet are. However, I would assume that also there's quite a bit of random sampling involved, so that not everything looks the same, right? So, yeah, it's just interesting that they're taking a similar approach at a much smaller scale here. Although, again, density is going to increase the count, and they've only got 62 devs.
All have the same footprint, an empty 80-meter flat circle, so they can be freely instantiated to any prepared location. And with the same API, we can also have just empty sockets in the world like this, and where we can instantiate things at runtime.
That's interesting that they leave empty sockets in the world for these things to fill in. I don't remember C.I.G mentioning anything quite like that. It sounded to me that Starchitect was more aimed at molding what it determined to exist to the surface that it placed it on, but Could be a little bit of both. The socket system also reminds me of Ashes of Creation's node system, so that's interesting.
There is a module for smaller streams. We pick random points above a certain height and trace them down in the natural flow direction. If the stream we get that way is long enough and hits an existing water feature, we save it. We've had a little bit too many problems with these, so they are disabled at the moment.
That's a bummer. I was going to say, when I'm looking at this picture, I have never seen a stream like that in Pax Dei. That would be a really cool thing to see. It's sad that it's disabled.
Sadly. And roads. The map data only has
Roads.
Connectivity info for the roads, which place is connected where. And the actual routes are generated.
Okay, here's something that C.I.G needs to consult with Mainframe on. Mainframe, please lend yourself out to C.I.G and help them implement a road system. I want roads on Star Citizen planets so bad.
And if the sites have defined a road connector, they are automatically connected to the main roads. And here another pro tip. In Houdini, it's cool. Really easy and fast to do all your route finding in one go, in one SOP, but it's not always good to do it that way. If you do it in a loop, one by one, it's slower, but you can get much more natural road networks because any new road can connect to any one already generated road. And cliffs, like probably everyone knows, any vertical bits of a height field, they are always super boring. So we are instantiating bigger cliff PCs on them. And with clever use of the PCs, we are actually using only 4 different PCs at the moment, but they're
boring in Star Citizen right now too, but some of that cliff stuff that they were showing us in V5 looks pretty incredible. Better than even this.
They just work really fine. Scattering, there is, of course, a lot of trees, bushes, and debris scattered all over the world. There could be a lot to say about this, but getting it all to look good is more an art than a science, so just keep on tweaking. And more about biome tiles in a bit. The rest of the generator is really about creating all the different outputs we need. There's, of course, all the visual 3D stuff you see in the world, which is mostly lots and lots of instancing. And it's quite curious, we really create very little new geometry. It's only the road surfaces that are actual new geometry. But there's a lot more than just the visual outputs. An MMO needs a lot of background data of all sorts, so we write out all kinds of textures and masks and JSONs for use by game systems. Just the resource system alone could be a talk of its own. Oh, and a pro tip about masks. Instead of, for example, a road mask, we don't have a binary, this is a road and this is not road, but we use 2D distance fields for everything. So a pixel says that this is the distance to the nearest road. It's when you need to use the mask somewhere, it's a much more flexible way. And B.R.O. By itself, the generator, the HDA, just generates its one cell within its own level, and something needs to take care of the overall process. And for that, we have B.R.O. It's a Python overseer for the whole build process. At its core, it loads levels, empties them out, sets options and cooks the HDA, runs all sorts of post processes, and then saves the levels. And each level is its own job, which is sent to the Houdini's own HQ farm controller. And B.R.O. also handles all the perforce traffic. So we push a button in B.R.O., wait a few hours, and we have a new world in Unreal.
Nothing like concurrency.
It's great. And after that, quick run through a couple of juicy bits. Much of the generator is really quite standard stuff, but I thought I'd highlight a couple of systems. Funnily enough, our biome tiles are actually quite close to what we saw in the prologue talk yesterday. So yes, biome tiles. So think of the scale spectrum of game worlds. It's the large forms are handled by the landscape geometry, like in the scale of dozen meters and up. And the small scale stuff, like below 1 meter and below, it's handled by textures, grass, and random small scattered bits. And that usually leaves a hole in the scatter or the scale spectrum for stuff of like a few meters in scale. Just randomly scattering stuff of this size makes things too random and cluttered, but you can't handcraft it all either. At least we can't.
Makes sense.
For this, we have biome tiles. The idea is to handcraft a library of hexagonal tiles with hand-placed meshes on top of height geometry.
This sounds almost exactly like what they were talking about with Starchitect. Am I wrong? But I feel like Starchitect is taking the exact same approach with this medium tier stuff. I remember some of the demonstrations we saw where they had basically like encampments or like a mining area or whatever, and like it consisted of like several elements, and they kind of put it down, and it boom, it just blanketed the area with that kind of layout. There's no way I'll find it right now. I would love to be able to jump right to it and show it, but
the world is then divided into a hex grid, and a random tile from the library is placed at each hex with a random rotation. And this is done according to the biomes, so that each biome only uses a given set of tiles. The biome tile height is used to modify the existing landscape, and all the meshes are placed at their modified heights. And we also support dropping meshes using physics here. This nicely satisfies the goal of having human-designed, natural-feeling features in the world, but so that they adapt to their surroundings. In theory, this introduces some repetition, but because of the variation in the base landscape and getting mixed up with the other scatter systems, you don't really feel the repetition. We also randomly delete bits from it.
I can attest to that. When I'm traveling through the world in Pax Dei, I don't feel repetition. I'm trying to think. I feel like at one point I did. I can't remember the specifics around the situation, but it's not a feeling I get very often, which is good, because I do get that feeling very often in a lot of cases. You know what? There are. The thing that gives me the biggest feeling of repetition at Pax Dei is the POIs, like the little castles that dot the landscape that you find NPCs in that you can go do battle with and kill them and loot them for gold and supplies. Those places feel copy and paste to me. But the actual geography and landscape of the world, I do not get a sense of repetition from. So I do wish they could improve on the repetitive feeling of the POIs, though. Anyway. And I did find the video that I was talking about, not from CitizenCon Direct, but from the CitizenCon last year, in which they were talking about Planetech V5 and Starchitect and some of the density work they were doing in the biomes and the planets. So let's just jump over and take a look at that video real quick, just so we could do some comparing and contrasting with what's going on in this one. Again, this is from CitizenCon 2950 World. It was from the segment called Brave New Worlds.
So let's have a look at extreme object density next. With the data saying we should have high rainfall and sunlight year-round, it's the perfect condition for our next biome to appear.
looks incredible. Again, this is on the density, and this is far more fauna density and etc. than anything we've seen in Star Citizen to date. And Pax Dei, for that matter. Talk about bringing worlds to life.
Considering everything you've just seen is still very much work in progress, the gameplay capture team really did a great job showing our work in the best possible light. With jungles, we wanted to explore the concept of vertical stratification, as they are the prime example for that. What it means is that you have horizontal layers of microbiomes defined by the species that thrives with the amount of sunlight and rain that still reaches there. The floor, herb and brush layer, we could almost do before, obviously missing the density.
I'm trying to get to the point where they start talking about the POIs.
Off stage, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody involved, especially my team in Frankfurt for doing such amazing work and being all around great people. And also to all of you guys. I really hope you have a fantastic CitizenCon. This concludes this phase of Gen.
So,
all right, here we go.
Let's talk about location density. We've emulated nature as well as we can to make sure our planets are physically based and realistic, and our biomes.
So I thought this, I wanted to jump on this, compare and contrast this, because I thought this related very closely to what they were talking about on the stage with the Pax Dei people were in the conference for, where they were talking about like the medium in between things and how they want to cluster those into biome tiles or whatever to layer those over the world. So I thought that stuck in my head that they talked about a lot of similar things here.
Are emergent, but it's time to start populating the verse, because where there's people, there are their lives and the structures they build. So it makes sense that whenever you go and explore these planets, that you find their lives. And what's even more important is that when we make these structures, that they use and they follow the same rules as our biomes, such as the jungles and the swamps. But before we continue, let's first take stock as to where we are now. At the moment in the verse, we have these custom, beautifully made locations, such as Ghost Hollow, we've got our distribution centers, or even just some outposts. And these have all been handcrafted by our designers and artists to hit that benchmark. And they've been working directly on the planet. However, going forward, this doesn't really scale with how we want to go forward with the game. Server meshing is about to arrive, and we're going to have a way higher player count. So those 73 bunkers across Stanton just won't cut it. But in general, it's also pretty barren. There's not much for you to explore and find stuff out there. So there's no exploration gameplay. You haven't really put your character to use for the way that you should. Yeah. So this means we need to go bigger, which means we need to change our workflow. And with any workflow means we need to first establish a new benchmark.
Going to a similar workflow that they're talking about in PAX.
So, with our new benchmark, we are ensuring quality and improve on our previous work and make it even better. And any location that you'll find needs to have its own unique personality, and no repetition. We don't want you to find the same location twice. This also means that this is your exploration and your findings. So when you go out there and explore with your Carrack or with your Corsair, is that whatever you find, you can share with your orgs or with your friends. As for density, if you fly down to the planet, we want you to find something, let's say, every 100 clicks. But also improve the mission experience. So when you stay more on the planet, you're more immersed, and you go from location to location. Just keep going.
In the scale difference, interesting there. Whenever you talk about the density in Pax Dei and the fact that the entire world that you were seeing and kind of the demos they were giving on stage there happens within 20 square kilometers. And then you come over to Star Citizen and they're saying, we want you to find something every 100 kilometers. Just funny.
So going forward, we are modularizing all our existing locations and assets. And we're basically making a library of buildings and layouts that we'll be using to no longer work directly on the planet. The neat thing, all these modules and assets can be iterated upon and tested right in the editor for all the designers and artists, to ensure fun gameplay and interactive sandbox activity, and also make sure all the mission stuff is there. Basically, we're building a toolkit. So let's look at some of the things that we need to keep in mind as we are making that toolkit. First and foremost, we've got our art style and branding. We've got things like Frontier for our settlements. We've got high-tech for the emergency shelters, but also utilitarian, like our bunkers and distribution centers. The richer the data, the richer these locations will be. Secondly, they all have a function. We've got mining for our mining outposts, farming for the farmsteads, or just places where people live. The function of the place will define the way the place looks as well, and its form. And last but not least, the people as well, the faction and their loadouts. We've got lawful people, like the new Citizens for Prosperity in Pyro, unlawful, such as Xenofred, and sometimes not even no one. And the place needs to look a bit, derelict. In different places, you'll find different people. So, now that we've made our toolkit and we've defined all this new stuff, let's start building thousands of locations. Yes, I said thousands. So, to avoid the same issue of working on...
We're going from dozens to thousands. I mean, this is the leverage that you get from this configuration-based rollout. Just like we were talking about earlier with, orchestration tooling and cloud computing environments. Same concept.
Directly in the planet, I'd like to introduce to you Starchitect.
Starchitect. Yes.
What Starchitect allows us to do is directly on a planetary scale scatter all these new libraries and modules and assets and no longer work directly on the planet. And it uses the same logical rule set as our emergent biomes.
Similar to how the Pax Dei people were talking about, after the landscape is created by the generation process they were describing to us, then you have that random scattering of POI, or random scattering of encounters and that type of thing throughout the terrain.
And it also gives us full control over the data that we set on these locations. So expect locations in places where they make sense. Let's kind of look at all this new Genesis data and all these new libraries and chuck it into Starchitect and see what it gives us. As you can see, we're now able to make full-size locations, and they will look completely different based on where you'd find them. The layouts are controlled by the rules, and it will reflect its place in the verse. We've got farms, mining outposts, but even our older locations, such as the bunkers that you find on Stanton.
You can see the similarities here between this and the biome tiles that we were just talking about with Pax Dei. Just completely different scales. Completely different scales.
Let's look at an example and kind of use the tool to really, make a location. We can define the rules, as I've mentioned a couple times by now. So for our mining outpost, it wants to be near a resource. We can specify what this resource needs to be. But we can also give it suggestions where sometimes you'd find it here and sometimes you wouldn't. If the location has refineries, it might want to be near water to refine the resources. Then secondly, we can define what buildings should be there. So obviously we need mining buildings, houses for people to live as well, and even power buildings that we can leverage with the resource network. Starchitect will intelligently figure out where to place these and what needs to be at the location. Next up, farms. Its rules, well, temperature. Not every plant can live in every temperature, but the same with soil type. Only certain plants can be in certain grounds. And then we can query the seed map to determine what plants you would find there. What are the harvestables?
How long till these
As for the targets,
farms are
again,
operational?
farm buildings, obviously, power buildings, houses, but even animals, such as our beloved quasi-grazers. And last but not least, derelict ships. We've got these all over the place currently. Rules, well, they'd be close to anti-air because they would be shot down. But even in harsh flight conditions, such as mountains or low visibility, you'd probably most commonly find them. Targets, well, crash ship parts, of course. Sometimes you'd find the full remains of a javelin, and the other time you might just find the nose of a starfarer laying around. So, let's talk about coherency. Sure, we can scatter all these locations everywhere on the planet, and you'll find them in places they make sense, but we can do better. You don't just want to find an outpost completely on its own, right? We want to make sure it really feels like people have built their lives here. So, let's talk about some missing bits. We want to tell tighter stories, such as the people's lives, but also logical exploration.
This is one huge difference between the two games we're focusing on in this video, Pax Dei and Star Citizen, and that is stories. Star Citizen is looking to weave a lot of stories and narration and all that kind of stuff into their sandbox. It's kind of a backplane for it, whereas Pax Dei has gone the complete storyless route, basically. There's none of that in PAX, so that's one less input into the PAX system that is creating these environments that Star Citizen has.
If I find one thing, I expect to find something similar or something else nearby. We also need more data control. What defines one mining outpost being different from the other ones, aside from the harvestables? And also give the narrative developments. Make sure people build near rivers, on mountains. They build near town halls. They build near distribution centers. So to hit that bit of our benchmark, we make sure that locations are near each other and group them together. The effect it gives is a fully developed landscape with vistas and points of interest all over. And we group them together in what we like to call a cluster, like this one, that has 13 locations. Let's talk about clusters. Clustering means generating locations near other locations. So, for example, if you find a distribution center, just like in the verse currently, I would find forward operating bases next to them. But if you go even further out, you'd find mining outposts to funnel those resources to the FOBs. Go out even further, you'd find caves around them, because that's where they might find some of the gems. And then we can even specify the data on a cluster level. All of the factions that live at this whole cluster, any mining outpost, that would be the same people, but also what commodities they sell, to find on what resource you'd find.
This is the slide that was sticking in my head earlier whenever we were looking at some of the slides on the screen from the mainframe guy giving the presentation. This makes so much sense, and you can see elements of this in what the other team is doing. Just, again, not to scale.
So let's look at an example of the clusters. We have our mining cluster. Again, we can define what rules we should have. Rules, well, near a resource, just like our mining outpost, but also it needs to be on a lawful planet. We can target on a planetary scale where they would need to be. They need protection. As for the targets, well, caves, mining outposts, but even trade posts. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Before I do so, I forgot data. we can, on a cluster level, specify, again, what mineral commodities, but also what harvestable types you'd find are in that region. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum, an unlawful cluster. What rules? Well, they need to be far away from any other cluster, because they want to be isolated and do their evil deeds on their own. And also on an unlawful planet, such as somewhere in the B.R.O system. For the targets, outlaw outposts, crash ships, because they would shoot them down, and also ruins from just places they just completely overrun. The data on this one, you'd find specific loadouts, and they'll be using weapons that you wouldn't find any in other legal system. And these weapons will be sold at the shops in these regions. So, now that we have a cluster, let's go even bigger. Just like our locations, we can put clusters near other clusters, and we group them together, ranging between 10 to 15 locations each. And we group this into what we call a sector. Like this one, that has about 120 locations. However,
that's awesome. And again, it's just a totally different scale. I think within that sector, one of those clusters is probably larger than the entire world of Pax Dei. Just to put it in perspective.
On a planetary scale, we can define how many sectors we should have, with each their own data and persona. And every single one of these locations is now ready for the mission system to hook up and give you gameplay, and for you to find a bunch of places on your own.
Keep this in mind, and then reflect back to what we just saw regarding progress on Planet Tech V5 and CitizenCon Direct, and how, in theory, we'll be seeing the first of these planets early 2026, or at least first half of 2026 with Nix 1. Gonna be crazy.
And just on this side of the planet, can you guess the number? We've got about 3,042 locations.
Just on this side of the planet.
And again, this means as Starchitect, we're just able to, on a planetary scale, just define how many locations we need, what you'd find there, and to just give that full identity.
Again, with parameters that people are controlling, very similar to how people are controlling the parameters in the Pax Dei world.
Thank you for listening. And I won't just see you in the verse, but I'll see you in a denser verse.
Density, there's that number we were talking about. Again, Pax Dei has the lead on density right now for sure, but based on these videos, if we remember, it's coming. It's coming to the verse. I cannot wait for jungles, thousands of locations. It's going to completely change. I don't know if you saw that other recent video I put out where, or maybe it was a short in a video where I was saying about this is not the effort you put in to something to use it as a backdrop. This is a primary feature of the game. It's exciting. I can't wait. Anyway, that was the bulk of what I wanted to watch from the Star Citizen thing that I think will have relatability. So let's go back and finish up the conference talk. Looks like we're almost done.
Each tile. And this is really the space between manual and procedural that we really like. And linear biome tiles are same-ish, but for lines instead of areas. We handcraft, say, 500 meters of roadside, 500 meters of lakeside, and so on, to form a library of strips.
The only thing Starchitect and Planet Tech V5 is missing is roads.
We need the linear features in the world we want to use these strips for. These are mostly automatically derived features, such as lakesides and roadsides, but we can also draw these straight on the map in QGIS. If you want to add an old wall going through the world or something. These can also be a bit more granular. For example, we have a road next to cliff as a separate type, so we can put some guardrails there. The way
Makes sense.
It works,
I've seen those.
We copy random sections from all applicable library strips
You know, when you're in the game and you're walking down these roads, you notice details like that. Like I remember the other day, I was walking up this road that kind of scaled along a cliff. And I remember stopping just to appreciate the view. And when I stopped and I turned, there was this little guardrail fence type thing in front of me. And it clicked. Like I noticed it there, but you just never stop to think about the complexity in the systems behind the game to make sure that that little detail is present. The fact that that's a whole different tile configuration. You know what I mean? Pretty cool.
And deform the result along our linear landscape features. This way we get details of this sort, again, in the middle of handcrafted and procedural. We also needed a way to get from our rough sculpt to a detailed terrain. And that needs more than just your basic erosion. At first we used Gaia version 1, but it was surprisingly hard to work with. So we wanted to check neural networks. We ended up using Electronic Arts GAIDA system. We downloaded lots and lots of public domain height data and got it trained to work just well enough for us. And this is not your modern generative AI, but old school GANs. And this is one
old school AI
from 2019, and it's getting a bit long in the tooth, so we are moving into our own system, but it's not quite there yet. And problems, it's always nice to hear about people's problems. So world partition, it's all in all, it's a great system, but it's been an endless source of trouble. Now with 5.4, it's finally starting to really work as it should. And 1 file per actor, it's great if you're working by hand, but for a pipeline, it's just an added inconvenience. And Unreal's grass system, it's a good example of things that work really nicely when you're working by hand, but getting it to update properly when scripted, it has been a headache for years. A more fundamental problem is the generator in Houdini can't see the Unreal assets, especially level instances. It just doesn't know what's in them. Sometimes we have additional geometry for that, like the site footprints we had, and sometimes we create a geo library on disk for Houdini, like for the Biome tiles. And the engine plugin, it's an asynchronous process, it's great for interactive use, but it just makes things harder for us. We can't just wait for the generation to finish in Unreal. And
asynchronous programming is always fraught with
a bit high
timing issues.
At the moment, we are on many cells. It's over 20 minutes, of which maybe 5 to 7 minutes are spent in Houdini, and the rest is spent on getting all the data from Unreal, from Houdini to Unreal. And this extra 15 minutes is getting quite annoying.
Instantaneous feedback is so important during development, so I can certainly appreciate the annoyance of that. I'm sure artists are making changes to those parameters and they want to see the results quickly. And it's more like take a lunch break and then see the results. On my teams, I am so adamant about reducing the amount of tooling on our projects to minimize feedback time. When we make a change to code, I want to see test results within seconds, not minutes. Minutes is way too long, right?
And especially when running live, it's important to be able to recreate an existing world. And with a generator, it's a bit of a chaos theory problem. When something changes in the beginning of the process, the end result can be very different. It's kind of the old butterfly thing.
Yeah.
You can mitigate it if you keep this in mind, but it's a real problem with the generative approach. And running a live game is very different from developing a new game from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
For this development phase we are in, the pure generator approach has been awesome. But for running a live game, we would actually maybe need something more like an editor. So we might have to ditch the live generation principle at some point after we launch the game. It's sad. So what do we have? It's the...
That's an interesting perspective. In Pax Dei, players can build on the environment, and Star Citizen is going to have a very similar challenge in that players are going to be able to put hab units and build player bases on the surface of these planets. And what he's saying here is that up until now, they have been relying on planet generation using these parameters and everything that they were talking about that humans can guide. But once the game is live, which it is now, changing any of those knobs could drastically alter the face of the world, which would just break everything, right? It would break player structures, it would confuse players. And so they're talking about moving from this generation approach to an editor-based approach, which makes a lot of sense, but it makes me wonder how C.I.G's team is looking at this in their universe. Because if C.I.G took a similar approach down the road and said, okay, the game's live now, we can't have any sweeping planetary surface changes or disruptions, we need to move to an editor-based system. Could you imagine? I can't really imagine the challenges with that at Star Citizen scale. That's something I'm definitely going to be thinking about.
25-minute-ish generation time, it's okay-ish. And you can easily bypass modules when you're iterating on something.
10
or you can
hours
just
for the
iterate
province.
in Houdini so when it's very fast. The main thing is you can create the whole world overnight. That's like the pain point, so it's okay. And a non-technical artist can rebuild a cell when iterating without touching Houdini, which is also nice. And most important of all, we are still making big changes to the world with no fear. So all in all, I will claim it a success. It's not Red Dead Redemption, but for a 5-person world team, we are quite happy. And that's where I leave you. Thank you.
Five-person world team.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very cool. How do you handle players transferring from province to province? Because you said there were only set entry points through certain, like if you want to go from one province to another. How is that handled in the engine?
Yeah, there's, it's really quite simple. It's the edges of the provinces are like mountain area, and there's like natural thin places where we put gates where you walk into, and then Unreal, it's basically a loading screen. The gate, you load a new route level and you spawn on the other side of the gate on the other province.
Yep.
It's okay. Actually, we have some cool tech around that. Like within the province, it's also divided into many Unreal servers. So when you walk around in the world, you're actually being handed over from one Unreal server to another. So that's how
They actually communicate that to you in the game too. Most of the server lines that I have found in the province have little rocky formations, like a line of rocky, like a linear rocky formation along the server line, just to let you know there's a server line there. And I can only imagine they've done that because of how underperforming it is. Again, like I said, anytime you cross a server line, there's jank, there's lag. If somebody crosses in front of you, they vanish. It does not have near the sophistication of Star Citizen's approach, but it's very similar to the reality of Ashes of Creation's implementation. All the same things apply to Ashes. If somebody crosses the server line in front of you, they vanish. anytime you cross the server line in either game, you get the jank and the lag and the rubber banding. Now, Ashes of Creation does not have any indicator of where those lines are, so you'll just be running along and you just randomly experience it, and it's definitely jarring. PAX actually lets you know just through landscape alterations that, hey, there's a server line here. You might not want to zigzag back and forth across it. Make sure you actually want to cross at this point. So it's a not too intrusive in the world method of letting you know of real world limitations. I personally appreciate it. It's better than the state that Ashes is in right now when it comes to server lines. Nowhere near as good as Star Citizen. Of course, it's a 62-person team with a 5-person world team, so you can't expect infinite productivity.
How we can
We'll finish this question and then we'll wrap it up.
Like MMO kind of player counts, and that's where we have some of our own cool tech around that. So when there's a lot of player buildings, it's not seamless, but for areas where there's no buildings, maybe you can't even notice it when you're changing servers.
Hi.
That's actually interesting. I had not considered that the jank would have anything to do with player buildings in the area. But it actually makes sense because in Pax Dei, they offer you a free floating camera, so you can hit F10 to go into free floating camera mode and you can like traverse the world. But I noticed, I don't know if it was like this in early access, but it's definitely like this in live. I noticed that if I'm standing on a cell and I pass into another cell with my camera, I can see the geography and the terrain and the landscapes, but I cannot see NPCs or buildings or anything in the next tile over. So those things actually are not loading. It makes me think that they're loading all of the province, or at least all of the home valley, or something along those lines. I have to think about that. Might even be the whole province, because I can fly as far as I want with that free floating camera, and I can see the geography, but I cannot see any buildings. The buildings and stuff won't render unless you actually cross over into that cell. So it makes sense that those things are loaded in on line crossing, and I can see what he means by buildings having an effect. Although, if you're in the wildlands, which is a place where you can't build, even in the wildlands, or in Lioness, which is the PvP zone you cannot yet build in, that's coming soon. If you cross server boundaries there, I get the constant jank and lag, so I don't know that whatever state the game was in whenever he had this talk, it's not quite that good now when it comes to zone loading.
I'm over here.
Hi.
How do you deal with potential issues with seams across the cells that are being processed, because they're processed separately, like for roads and streams and stuff like that?
Yeah, that has been a big problem. It's for almost everything, we just disallow anything passing across the borders. So we kind of error out, and we have to move anything away if it tries to cross the level border. And we, just to be sure, we fade out almost after each module, we fade out all the effects from that module from the edge, so that the edge stays pristine.
So you have no really long roads. They're always kind of
the roads are a problem because they have to pass it. We usually just try to get them to pass on level areas of the world.
All right, thank you.
Edges are such a problem. You go way back on my channel, you'll see, I don't know, my third or fourth video was all about the edges between servers and kind of my thinking there. But it's really interesting. Again, it goes back to me saying that the Pax Dei team is one of the most pragmatic teams of the three that I've been watching, 3 or 4. And so they just take the approach of, let's just avoid the problems. C.I.G has a very robust and complicated solution to this problem, which is amazing. And then Ashes of Creation sits somewhere in the middle with their projection system, which I have not seen work successfully yet. But their idea is that whenever a user, like a player, gets close to an edge, they actually have a projection of their character onto the neighboring edge, so that you can see people from your server into the next server over, which is also an interesting solution to the problem, although I can't comment on how well it works yet because I have not seen it work. While in Star Citizen, they have a completely different solution, which involves, you know, the entity stream and the ability for multiple servers to see the same state and therefore render cross-border. So, interesting stuff.
Hiya, you might have answered this one, but I don't know if I caught it. For your POI placements, is that done in your hand-painted map stage, or do you have rules that dictate where they can go within the Houdini process?
Yeah,
for like settlements,
any of the bigger
human bits.
It seemed to me like that's the hand stage did the sockets, and then the sockets were populated later. I don't know. My understanding is correct.
POIs, they are marked on the map, so it's like a human decision that this kind of like a castle ruin or something goes into this place, and then we use of course we don't know what the actual level instance is like in Houdini, but we have those footprint geometry on disk which we use to
that's
modify the environment so that it fits.
For your larger settlements, do they have to go on flat areas, or have you found a way to put them on more geometry?
We can put them anywhere. Sometimes they can be hard to reach if you put them in stupid places, but the system can handle anything.
Thank you.
Don't put them in stupid places. Easy.
So when Unreal updates to a new version, how much does that mess up your pipeline?
Oh, yeah.
Good question.
It has depended on the version. We have been we quite often upgrade, but sometimes it takes a week or two, and sometimes it takes a month or two.
Oof.
Are they aware of what you're doing? Do they work closely? Because you guys have quite an intricate pipeline. It must be
yeah,
interesting.
We are talking with them. Yeah, we are one of the bigger like world partition users at the moment. But it depends on what changes in the engine.
Thank you. I think that was the last question. Thank you very much for an amazing talk.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a good talk. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Good find, Decker. Thank you again, Decker, for linking the video and suggesting we take a look at it together. Yeah, it was. I definitely had, like, as I was watching it, I had a ton of just cross-game thoughts from all the different games we're paying attention to, and how each of them are solving similar problems in very similar but yet different ways. With especially Ashes of Creation and Pax Dei, they have the most overlap and commonality in their approaches. Star Citizen is solving similar problems at a completely different scale with the most radically different foundation, which happens to be far more robust and feature-rich, and especially when it comes to things like server lines and boundaries and that type of thing, far more proven in practice at this point, which is crazy considering it's probably the most alpha game of the three. So that bodes well for Star Citizen fans, in my opinion. Anyway, it was really fun watching this. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope I added some value. Again, if you find anything like this that would be cool to take a look at together on the channel, feel free to send it my way like Decker did. I have a channel on the Discord server. You can get a link to the Discord server in the description below. We have a channel there for these kinds of things, and YouTube recently unlocked the YouTube community feature for desktop. This used to be mobile only, but you can get that on the desktop now. And I have a domain that will take you right to the community page, so you don't have to remember the complicated navigation that YouTube demands. If you just go to grolo.community in your browser, it'll take you to the YouTube community page. It's cool because you can post there. You don't have to wait for me to make a post anymore, or you don't have to wait for me to make a video to leave a comment. Like we can now communicate async through YouTube. Like if you find something cool that maybe we could take a look at together, you can just go to grolo.community. It'll take you to the YouTube community page, and you can just post there as well. So either there or Discord works. I think you do have to be a channel subscriber to be able to post to that page, though. And you have to have been a channel subscriber for at least a day or something. So just keep that in mind. I also think that YouTube, if you post a link there, that I have to approve it before it shows up. So don't be surprised if your comment doesn't show up right away. I'll be monitoring it and approving those things as fast as I see them. I still review every comment that comes into this channel, and I'm on top of them, as you can probably tell. So cool. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I got a couple more videos planned for this coming week, so we will see each other again soon. Until then, hit me in the comments with any thoughts you had on this video. It was really interesting, so I think there could be a good discussion on this, so I look forward to continuing it in the comments. Until then, take care, and Grolo out.